All right, everyone, welcome back to the 3 of 7 podcast, and you are in for a real big treat today because she's come back, the fan favorite. She's been gone for quite some time.
Don't make it weird.
But she has blessed us with her presence today on the podcast, the beautiful Brooke Rite. Biscuit, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I tell you what, the listeners are going to be so tickled.
Everybody but the old white men are going to be really tickled.
We have actually quite a few new listeners to the podcast, I think. I've been seeing the numbers of the podcast jump over the last maybe month or so.
Nice.
So if you're a new listener, Brooke is my wife. How long we been married, boo-boo?
13 years this year.
13 years. She is my wife, and she's been through a lot of stuff in life, like many of you who are listening, and she has always good things to add to the conversation. Is there anywhere where your whole story is kind of captured? I guess you'd have to go back to the origin episodes, which brought us up to a certain point. We're probably due for another one or two of those, huh?
We are due
one
for
of these days.
I think Origin's the best place to find my story and your story.
Those are way back in the catalog of podcasts.
They are.
They're on YouTube too, I think. I think videoed those.
Yeah.
The Origin series. Those would be on the main channel, I think. And I don't know what numbers they were, but.
And I used to be a regular on the podcast, and then you guys wouldn't get a fifth mic, and then you put me in a chair in that corner where I sat lower than everybody else, and if I wanted to talk, I would have to reach over in front of Blake and slide a mic across the table and talk, and then slide it back.
Well, yeah, it definitely wasn't optimal.
So I quit coming on.
It definitely wasn't optimal. And then we also have, the OG.
Did you forget his name?
Cornbread on the show today. And if you're wondering where Chili and Blake are at, well, they're on vacation.
Blake's doing something meaningful.
They just both decided to take a vacation.
He's not on vacation.
Gallivant.
And everybody needs a vacation every now and then. So I'm not going to get too down on them, but that's where they're at.
Yeah.
And if I sound a little funny, I got a little sinus thing going on, popped up out of nowhere. But we're going to get through it. Biscuit, here in just a little bit, and CB, I want us to begin a conversation around the forging of the mind, essentially. It's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and it's something that came up just this past week on the basic course, Team 31, the forging of the mind. And, in the creed says in the first stanza, basically, it talks about a common human with an uncommon desire to succeed, forged by adversity. And what does that actually look like? And what does that actually mean? Because I think when we hear those words, forged by adversity or forging our mind, we don't stop and think about what does that actually mean, and what is that process like, and what is it actually doing to our minds and our bodies as we go through it. And what are we trying to accomplish with that process, right? And so I want to go around and kind of talk about what I think that means and share some stories with each other about what that process has actually looked like for each of us. Before we get into that, I do want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by our partner at Drink HOIST. DrinkHOIST.com. This is our hydration partner here at 3 of 7 Project. We've been using HOIST for years now. I used it as my primary hydration supplement when I ran the Cocodona 250 a couple years ago, and drank HOIST for probably, about 4 days straight, huh, Biscuit?
Yeah, you did.
Something like that. And I want to tell you that it works if you are out getting after it, running, working out in the heat. It's summertime now in the South. If you ruck, you run, you swim, anything that you do where you're sweating and you need to replenish your hydration and your electrolytes, which is one of the most important parts of keeping you in the field longer and keeping you going further and faster, Drink Hoist is second to none. It's made in the United States, 0 preservatives, amazing people behind the brand, and I just want to let you guys know it works. And if you want to support us here on the show, if you get something out of the show, if we make you think, if we provide some sort of value, one of the ways that you can support the show is by supporting our partners who help make these episodes possible and help bring them to life. So check them out at drinkhoist.com. Highly recommend just ordering a few cases of Hoist and having them around the house throughout the summer so you can grab a bottle and replenish all that stuff that you've been sweating out.
And I wanted to share a story about Hoist because I feel like you and I, when we buy things and when we put our money towards things, I really like to buy local and I like to buy from companies that I know do cool stuff. And like a good example of Hoist, one among many, is the people at ESP reached out because these people with disabilities, when they're outside during the summer for long periods of time, they don't like to drink water. And when we had our camping trip with the adults with disabilities, we had Hoist, and they they chugged Hoist. Yeah. And like we had no dehydration problems, no overheating problems, and that's a big issue for that community. And so Katie reached out to me last month, and she was like, "Hey, we have camp coming up. I know how much the participants loved Hoist. Can you reach out to them for me?" And I did, and they immediately responded, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll get a pallet of cases on the way."
Yeah, like they do that.
No charge, no, like, sure, absolutely, here. It's like, if you want to give your money to something, that's the type of company that I would want to be putting my money towards.
That's when I say a company that has good people behind the product, that's what I mean. They put their money where their mouth is. I mean, I've seen Hoist send out free product to first responders, to military, to ESP, which stands for Extra Special People. It's a nonprofit that we've worked with in the past that serves people with disabilities. And Hoist always shows up and puts their money where their mouth is. They don't just say they support military. They don't just say they support first responders, firemen, police officers. They don't just say that they are, stand for those values. They actually show up when the opportunity exists. So thanks for bringing that up, Boo Boo. Really appreciate that. That is a cool story. Now,
shout out to Rachel.
Before we get into the forging of the mind, apparently you guys have been doing some research.
No, I have been doing research, and Corn has relevant things that go along with the research.
Tell me about this.
I've done a case study on you that you were not aware of, and I'm about to reveal it to you live on this podcast.
Okay.
Oh, exciting.
It's so exciting. So Chad went through a phase for I would say 2 or 3 years. You can clarify for me. Where every night for dinner, you were eating a huge ribeye, white rice, and a pound of cheddar cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And your farts were horrific consistently. Like that was when we were talking about, Chris is laughing. That's when we were talking about needing the light in the bed. Do you remember that conversation, Grizz, where we said we needed a light to warn me? It was it was really dark season for me. The smell was putrid. And so you've given that up because you finally let go of this whole farce that vegetables are toxic. Thank goodness. So the last, I would say probably 8 or 9 months, you've been letting me feed you vegetables out of the garden, fermented vegetables, good meat. We're still eating a lot of meat.
You know what's amazing about you? You do everything for me.
You
make sure that I'm
stop.
fed.
Let me finish.
You make sure that I'm
do you
healthy.
See what he's doing?
You make sure that my bed is made. You make sure everything for me is perfect.
Can you not undermine my segment?
No,
this is my segment.
On. I just wanted to add
just
that
let
in
me
there.
have it. So the case study is you did the first part on your own. That was the not placebo. That was the controlled part. where you did that and your gas was terrible. You would blow up the bathroom and it was unbearable and it was consistent. Since we've changed to a plant-heavy diet with a lot of fresh vegetables and fruit and a meat with every meal and a lot of eggs, I'm not joking. His farts don't stink anymore. Ever.
I don't even really fart anymore. I mean, I might fart once a week.
I don't think that's good, bub.
That's not true.
Well, the stuff I'm eating is not producing any gas, man.
You might be
I bet I don't fart once a week.
A blockage going on
No.
if you ain't farting.
No. So that led me to this scientific question of, is the smell of your flatulence directly correlated with your overall health? And my research says absolutely. Absolutely.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So
it's a health indicator.
It's a huge health indicator. So I will be unveiling a new drink coming out in the next 2 months that will help neutralize your flatulence odors. But that's just a tease for that. I just want to tell the listeners and you, Corn, I know this is a problem you struggle with, that if you start consuming more fresh vegetables and fruit and like fix your gut bacteria, which you were telling me something you can share, you will be healthier. And if someone in your life has real bad stank gas, you need to like address it and just let them know that like you're concerned for their health and like you just he's over there giggling that you can help them.
There you go.
Well,
Yeah.
you know something about eating vegetables. You cannot buy good vegetables in a grocery store. Like even the organic vegetables that you can buy in a grocery store, when you eat vegetables that are grown at home, the stuff that Brooke and her team grows, when you eat that, you realize how rich in flavor all of those vegetables actually are. Like the difference between all the different types of green leafy stuff that you eat, the flavor profile is so distinct. Like you actually taste it. And it goes for everything.
Broccoli.
Green beans, broccoli, tomatoes,
Strawberries.
Any sort of fruit that you can grow. But I don't blame people for not wanting to eat vegetables if they have to buy them from the grocery store, because I eat vegetables from the grocery store now. If I have to, they have no flavor.
No, they're bland.
I don't even know how that happens. I don't know if a lot of those organic vegetables are being grown with hydroponics or in a greenhouse or what. They're not getting real soil and sunlight, and
that's part of it. But a huge part of it, like tomatoes is a great example. Tomatoes, like when the flavor comes from nutrients, and the nutrients come when they're fully ripe, right? Like that's full peak nutrient. Well, almost all your grocery store tomatoes are picked when they're still green and hard as a rock.
Yeah.
And they're transported to these facilities, and then they're put in chambers with gas that like ripens them to a certain softness, and then they're brought to the grocery store, which flavor sucks, but the nutrients is the thing that really sucks. Is like it's never ripening on the plant fully, so you're not even getting a quarter of the nutrients that should be there. But the good thing for what you're saying is farmers markets are like blowing up right now. Like almost every town has a farmers market now, and they're getting more and more popular. And so like if you want to eat more vegetables and you're worried about your health because your gas is really bad, you should find the closest farmers market and buy local.
I've also noticed though, even we're part of a, what do you call that, like a farm share?
It's a CSA.
CSA, where
farm
we get
share.
a box of vegetables and greens and stuff every week. But I've even noticed their stuff is not as rich in flavor as the stuff you grow. And I just wonder if there's something about the scale of it, or if it's being grown in a greenhouse, if that's different than the plant that's being grown out in the sunlight in the ground, in the dirt. But I've even noticed their stuff is different. And I also think the varieties of vegetables that you plant make a big difference, because like the tomatoes that you're growing are heirloom tomatoes, and that basically means you can pull the seeds and replant the seeds, and like these tomatoes are just like so colorful, and even the flavor profile between the different types of tomatoes is totally different. Mm-hmm. So I even think the types of greens, like what's that bok choy? Pak choy, like all these different
Did
greens.
you hear that?
Yeah.
You hear that Asian flair he got?
But when you plant these
Pak
things
choy.
in all these different varieties, it makes eating vegetables so much more fun.
Yeah.
Because like you can eat a salad one night and then eat the next night, it tastes totally different, and it's not because of the dressing that you put on it.
Yeah.
Texture, everything's different about it. I've never been one to enjoy gardening or planting. It's not something that I have a knack for, although I think that I could learn it. But it's not something I've ever been passionate about. But I think that if I ever lost you, I think I would grow a garden. I think it's that beneficial.
You would be so overcome with grief, you could never go anywhere near a garden.
Well, that's
it
true.
It would remind you of me, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That could be a possibility.
Yeah.
How much space do you think a person needs to grow enough food to at least, use something from their garden on a daily basis? Like
very little space.
You use beds primarily, right? Raised beds.
Yes. But when we lived in Virginia, we had an in-ground garden that was more food. Our whole road ate off of our garden.
That is true. And what was that? Maybe there wasn't that
like a fifth of an acre.
Yeah.
Bless you.
That's what I was going to say. It wasn't even a quarter of an acre.
Well, I think people, like, if you want to get into it, just get, like, some of those galvanized bins from Tractor Supply or something and start there. And I think people think they need this big old plot. But if you got one of those, like, I don't know the sizes, but those galvanized bins that are like water troughs for cows, drilled you some holes in the bottom of it, put good soil in there, you could have 2 tomato plants or a tomato plant, a pepper plant, and some herbs or something. It would, like... a little bit of space goes a long way.
It's just getting
Not right now, no.
It's getting the soil right, I think, is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Getting the right soil.
Yeah.
Because like in those garden beds, because you can pack it with the right soil, you can grow plants so much closer together. So you're not using near as much space.
But we've digressed from the urgent message of if you have bad gas that you need to be concerned about your health.
What have you been learning, CB? About fermented foods?
Yeah, I just been watching a guy on how like I was telling Brooke, like the only thing I knew about fermented foods is that sauerkraut smelled really nasty and looked nasty, and there was no way I was going to eat it. And then I seen this guy, and he was talking to. He does a lot of smoking and grilling, but he ferments as well. And the way he was explaining it and showing it, the probiotics and everything, and I was like, well, really, if that tastes as good as he says it does, you would kind of be stupid not to do it and at least try it.
What types of foods he fermenting?
Oh, he's corn, any types of peppers, strawberries. And the strawberries, he was saying how you could really drink it and like, evidently dogs can eat strawberries and that kind of fermented strawberries for their probiotics as well.
Really?
Yeah. So that might be the drink you're looking for your flagellants. The
fermented strawberry water.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Like pickling watermelon rinds. I remember when I was a kid, I would eat watermelon rinds all the way down to the green. But he's pickling those. So I'm going to start. My wife's supposed to order me some of those burping lids. Give it a shot.
That's fun. Yeah. You remember when I used to do that? I'd have to go open those lids and let the air out and then turn them back on.
Yep.
We've done pickles. We've done a lot of
We've
stuff.
done kombucha.
We have
You
done
know all
kombucha.
that drink we drink?
Yeah,
That's a fermented drink is what that is.
Yeah, we've made that.
When I got COVID, that's all I drank. Well, that's how I dealt with the COVID, is I sent stuff into my gut because that thing's been plugged up.
The light went out.
Just sent stuff into my gut. That's how I drank kombucha.
Kombucha.
Well, go ahead and plug that thing back up, Cornbread. The viewers are just going to have to deal with a wire hanging right there.
What's wrong with this light that just went out?
I don't know. It was charging.
Darn.
You know how it is around here.
Yeah, that's rough.
Well, fermenting food was, for most of human history, one of the only ways to preserve food. So much of our diet naturally would be composed of fermented food, right, baby?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge argument for like all the metabolic disease that we're experiencing right now. I think it's mostly the sugar and crap, but a lot of people say that like our guts were conditioned over hundreds, possibly thousands of years to like accustomed to processing fermented food, and now all of a sudden it's like the average American doesn't eat any fermented food. Like even pickles, people like to buy the shelf stable pickles. They won't buy fermented pickles, you know?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't guess canning is not fermenting, right?
No.
Okay.
Pretty much in the grocery store, if it's not refrigerated, it's not fermented, because you witnessed at our old house when that bottle exploded in the trash can. Like if you
What
leave,
was in that?
It was kombucha we had made.
Oh, okay.
But if you leave anything with like live bacteria in it sealed and don't keep it in refrigeration, it will expand and explode. So, like if you're looking to eat fermented food, get out of the center area of the grocery store.
So old ways to preserve food would have been fermenting, smoking, and then I guess
Salt, curing.
Yeah,
salt cured,
Yeah,
and then I guess more recently canning.
yeah.
Or if you had a bang up root cellar, you could
That in a root cellar was basically like a primitive refrigerator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We had a student on the basic course this past team, and she talked about she canned a lot of meat. Have you ever done that, CB?
No.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was talking about how good it was. And I was in the SEAL teams with a good friend from Pennsylvania, and I guess maybe it's bigger in the Northeast or whatever, but that's what they did with all their deer meat.
Really?
They canned it.
Raw, or they cooked it? And
Well,
then
I
canned
think it gets cooked maybe in the canning process.
Yeah.
What?
It gets cooked, but you season it and everything in the can so that when you open it up, it's just ready to eat.
We might need to learn how to do that. That would probably be a great skill to have if crap went south.
That would be, because then it takes some equipment too.
Yeah.
The canning process takes some specialized equipment.
Yeah, we might need to figure that. We might need to figure that out.
And
Grizz says he knows how to do it.
And also smoking. I mean, that's a lost art. When
Yeah.
you look at all old home places, every single old home place has a smokehouse
Yeah.
out back. Every single one.
My grandfather had a smokehouse.
Really?
Yeah, sure did. He cured meat and everything. He had big salt boxes. He'd lay meat out in the salt boxes and cover them up. Now, I was young, so I don't know the process, but I remember being in the smokehouse with him and him throwing meat in the salt boxes and hanging meat up on the back porch. And I remember thinking, why is the flies not just, because when I was a kid and I'd kill like a rabbit or something and leave it laid out, it'd be ate up with maggots and flies, and he'd hang this meat up. And, I was 7, 8 years old. I remember wondering, why is the maggots and flies not just tearing this? Well, he'd cured it. They didn't want no part of it.
That's got to be an art form too. Like I feel like him and other people really knew how to do that. If you got that wrong, you'd probably get sick as a dog.
Yeah, he had people come from all around that would buy from him.
Dang, that's so cool.
I remember the first time I ever saw a cured ham or leg off of a pig. You've seen them before.
Yeah,
haven't
oh
you?
yeah,
Ed Vassar had it at his house.
Of course, Ed
He
had
it.
that.
It was in his shed, and
It was in his
it
shed?
was covered in mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to refrigerate them.
right.
It was covered. The whole thing was covered in mold, and I thought, what on earth? And he cut the mold back off of it and then started eating it.
Yeah,
Not the moldy part, but the meat
Under
that
it.
was underneath.
yeah,
And he swore up and down it was outstanding.
yeah.
But how crazy is it how much of, that knowledge has been completely lost.
Yeah, because of the Frigidaire.
Rich.
Seriously.
Quickly,
Yeah.
so quickly. I mean,
Yeah,
what do you
absolutely.
what are you talking about? 4 or 5 generations?
Yeah, I guess.
So that knowledge has been lost. Well, maybe over the course of the last 70 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably, because when did your grandfather pass, Corn?
It was in the 90s, but he had quit doing that by the time I was in my 20s.
Well, those folks were like, thank God we don't got to do all this to eat good anymore. Like, we're over here like, dang, we wish we knew how to do that. And they were probably like, oh, great. Like, I can actually just sit down and eat some meat. I don't have to spend 3 days preparing it.
Yes.
Like,
So he was born right before the Depression. So really it's probably been dead since, what they call the people that fought in World War II, the greatest
The boomers?
generation. No, they were called the greatest generation.
oh, really?
Yeah, so it's probably lost with them. Like they probably knew of it and knew the intricacies of it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they were indeed doing it, in the 60s and stuff, but
Dang.
yeah.
You think about how our lives are set up today in this modern culture, where we have the luxury of basically being gone all day and working some job, right?
Some artificial made up thing that we find importance in.
some job, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you had to do all of that, your job would be your own survival.
Yeah.
It would be what is it that you are contributing to your survival and to the survival of your community. Because you're not only having to produce enough smoked meat for you and your family, but then you're also maybe the guy in the neighborhood that smokes the best meat. And so then you're trading that for the dude that grows the best garden.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like that would be your life.
Yeah.
And we would not exist. Because podcasts and this job that we do is kind of this made up thing because now everybody has a lot of time on their
There's
hands.
space for it.
And they
Yeah.
need to be entertained. And I feel like a lot of jobs out there now, especially now, the last decade, there's so many jobs that would not have ever existed because it's literally something to fill people's time.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean,
What-
think about how many people now are making a living off of rental houses. I on that specific one, I know people who believe that who are morally opposed to that, to making a living off of something that is a basic need for every single human being in terms of housing. In other words, they're opposed to it morally because what has happened is because so many people are into this rental thing, you know what I mean? That there are no longer houses for people to buy. And the houses that are left for sale, any sort of deal that's out there is being bought up and hoarded by these people who rent these houses. And so there's not an inventory of homes for young families to get their life started with. You know what I mean? It's created this weird space where we were just talking about your son this morning. Like he's had to make a decision to, the rent's so high on everything, and it's an impossibility to buy something at his age, and that's because you're talking about just in this area, thousands and thousands of homes are possessed by just a few, relatively few individuals who are renting these things out. And that creates problems like with the community, right?
Well, there's been a lot of sketchy. I feel like we talked about this a couple years ago on the podcast about like those big companies. I think one of them is called like BlackRock or something, but buying up like not just really wealthy individuals, but like these big corporations buying up real estate and creating like where Cooney and Buck can't afford to get a house.
Yeah, that report actually just come out within the last week, and there's 8 states in the nation that those corporations bought more houses in all of those 8 states than individuals did.
That's sketchy to me. Like there's something, and those companies are tied into the federal government deeply, and like there's some kind of weird something. I've been listening to too much Joe Rogan, but there's weird stuff happening there.
Georgia was one of them. It was like Georgia, Washington, Oregon. You know, it was states that are got big populations in them as well. But yeah, corporations are buying them up, dude.
Sketchy. You can't compete.
Do you think there should be a law against that, or do you just think? Because I'm never one to advocate for more laws.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like we live in a quote unquote free country. Well, if a bunch of super wealthy individuals want to get together and start a corporation that goes and buys all the freaking real estate.
Yeah.
It's like, well, should we create another law saying that is actually not allowed? Because it does cause problems, but then we're still like...
the thing that bothers me the most about it is, especially since COVID, maybe even a little bit before, it's evident that it's okay for companies to show bias, whether it's way left or way right. That's okay. They can do business however they want or whatever. It was shown that it's okay for the federal government to say you cannot let anyone work for you unless they get the vaccine.
Yeah.
Well, those companies are companies as well, and I don't want them to be able to say we're going to make sure that 80% of our residents are white, or we're going to make sure 80% of our residents are black, or we're going to make sure that 40% of our residents are immigrants, or so on and so forth. And I don't want them to say the federal government told us that if you ain't vaccinated, if your child doesn't do this, if you don't do this, then you can't live in our house.
I didn't even think about that.
They're a company just like all these other companies. Though they had employees and those people were involved with those companies because they were employees. But what would stop a company just because you're renting saying, hey, if you don't do this, then the federal government says I can raise your rent $800 more until you do this. Mm-hmm. And essentially it kicks you out of your house because you can't afford to pay for, the mistakes you're making that the federal government says you're making.
But nobody's going to take that choice to get kicked out of their house. They're just going to do what it is that they're required to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I think we've probably discussed before that the society is moving in a direction to where actually the tyrants that want control, actually one of their agendas is to take away or make owning personal property an impossibility. Right, and that in and of itself is all about control because of exactly what you just explained.
Right. Yeah.
Dang, that's got me a little shook because I was upset with it from the angle of just what you guys were talking about, like with Buck or somebody who is middle class, even middle upper class, and struggling to find a house, and how wrong that is. But that's so true about how you don't have somebody by the balls better than if you're holding their home over their head.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, that, especially if you have kids, that's next level control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's freaky.
Yeah, and that's why there are people, and I have to say, like, there's a part of me that agrees with the people that I know who are morally opposed to making their living by renting these houses to people. They are in direct. They are morally in opposite. They think that is not right. You should not be doing that. That if you have a house and you want to leave it, you should sell it to somebody so that they can own personal property and they can have a house that is theirs to live in.
Yeah. That makes sense under that explanation. Yeah, absolutely.
The question you posed, though, Boo, like, I think that's a really good question that's got me thinking is, like, obviously, I think the four of us agree that more regulation from the federal government is never a good thing.
Yeah.
However, like, my mind does soften to the idea of there being some kind of law where, like, big corporations. But see, that's the thing. Like,
well, there are laws against corporations. That all started with who was that? Roosevelt
owning real estate.
I don't know. It wasn't I think it was Teddy. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. Ted. He basically made laws that were debilitating to these massive corporations that were running these mining operations and these factories and all this stuff.
I think
like
he went
so
after
this isn't a new problem.
Right,
We're just talking about it in terms of housing now versus back then. It was like these big corporations were getting super wealthy because they lived in a free country, and it was a bunch of super smart, wealthy dudes that got together and said, yeah, we're gonna, and all these people that were working for them were basically just getting like killed and like barely getting making any money.
That's the story of the Rockefellers, like what you're talking about. Like they were, the stuff they were doing to people, extortion and violence.
Well, they basically designed their own economy. A lot of those people that worked for those mines got those paid by the company with stamps and so
their own currency.
They could only use them in their stores.
That's sketchy.
Yeah. Like, and they had to go to their doctors to seek medical attention and so on and so forth. They just created their own economy, and like all the money they was getting was theirs. I mean, it wasn't getting distributed locally or anything. Yeah.
Man, this just dips a pinky, and I don't think we have enough like days in the year left to talk about that balance between the benefits of capitalism versus like a free economy. Our taxes do not reflect that we're a free economy. But you guys know what I'm saying, like what you're talking about. Like, there is space for people like Rockefeller to completely take over an industry, or for BlackRock to buy up, by 2030, 80% of the real estate in the United States, and there's no private home ownership anymore. And like, our economy supports that. So what do you do? I mean, and is regulation the right option? Like,
yeah, because the other option, and the only way for it to move in the other direction without government intervention would be for the citizens of the country to basically protest that.
Yeah.
But then that will force a large percentage of the citizen population to have to suffer for some amount of time. In other words, if everyone in the United States said, you know what, this is a free country, we believe in private property ownership, so BlackRock, guess what? We are not living in any home that you own. We are not living in it. Well, the citizens could bankrupt that company.
Right.
But they would be living in tents or piling up in houses.
It would cause the citizens to have to suffer, and that's why nothing will change ever in America, is because we as people do not have the capacity to choose suffering. We don't.
I think that's all part of I was daydreaming about this the other day. I think we've talked about this, but I love the subject. I think it's part of the overarching theme of, like, we're talking about your granddaddy that used to be able to cure meat. And then when it got to where he didn't have to work that hard anymore, he's like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's painstaking. And it's like this slow curve to where we get more and more comfortable and we crave more and more entertainment and more soft things and more. And it's just this, it's like, here's independence and freedom from government and from rule. And we're over here, like you're talking about, Boo, like the idea of two families taking up one house to maintain their freedom, or sleeping in a tent, for goodness sakes. Probably, I would say 96% of the United States would never do that in the name of freedom. They would never.
No,
like,
and
we're
that's
so
that's
soft.
the only other option to change things in the United States. If you don't want to give more power to the government, which you know they're ultimately abused, the only other way to change things is for people and communities to band together in order to change things,
right,
based off of the decisions that they're making. You know, people people get so, and I'll catch a lot of heat for this too, but we just saw not long ago all the workers who like offload the cargo ships. That, what do they call those? They call that
strike.
A union, right?
Yeah.
People get mad at these unions, but that's what these people are doing. These people have said, no, you know, we don't need the government's help. Like, we have banded together, and if we don't like what we're getting paid by this massive corporation, we will just stop working.
Right, yeah.
Like, that's what they've done. But people hate these unions, man.
Yeah, the unions aren't popular in the South at all.
I've never understood that. I've never understood.
They can't be controlled.
Yeah.
There's
But like, you'll hear like good old boys talking crap about these unions. I'm like, well, what they're doing is actually genius.
Right.
Like, they don't have to sit around and wait for the government to pass some sort of policy that says this corporation needs to be treating them or paying them more or doing something for them. No, they've just all banded together and said, screw you. We just won't work.
And they have someone that is actively working in their favor constantly. It's not necessarily, I'm going to wait until there's a problem and then this person. No, that staff is working for their benefit the whole entire time. They pay union dues or whatever, and that's why some people's like, oh, I ain't got to pay to get anybody help me make my money. You know, I'll make my money on my own. Well, they're paying those weekly or monthly dues or whatever to make sure these people keep their best benefit in mind, and they constantly work toward it. Mm-hmm. It's not just wait until you break your arm and see if the company helps you or not, or wait until it's time to strike and then we'll tell you how to do it. No, they're constantly working on that new contract that's coming up in 2 or 3 years. Back and forth.
Yeah, and this applies to everything. It's funny how much we complain about taxes, me included, you know, going back to personal property ownership. Well, really, we don't own anything. Yeah. We're leasing everything in terms of property, real estate. We are leasing everything from the government because any real estate you own, if you don't pay the property tax, they come and seize it from you.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, look, if every citizen of the United States said, no, we ain't paying you property taxes, federal government. No, this is my property. I bought it. I paid for it. I inherited it. It's been in my family for years. No, we're not. Like, they don't have the power. They only have the illusion of power. Somehow, it's the strangest dang thing.
Right.
How this little small group of people can control millions upon millions, when if just those millions would say, nah, we're not going to do that, because that's not right. We should be able to own this property outright. It's ours. You can't take it from us.
Yeah.
It would change literally within weeks.
I feel like an idiot for not knowing the history behind that, but that's literally one of the biggest mistakes we made when we allowed that to happen, when the nation allowed that to happen, property taxes.
Yep.
Like you said, I've seen it. My grandfather's farm, when he passed away, he had a farm, a small farm, in a community that when he was growing up was as rural as it gets, dirt roads, so on and so forth. But that county became part of Metro Atlanta really, really quick. And the property taxes in his lifetime went out of sight. People wanted to be in that area to build $1 million homes. They built $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million homes. And it basically run them out because the taxes got so high. They got so high that the four sisters that were the overseers of the property couldn't pay the property taxes on it, and had to pay the property taxes upon selling it because they couldn't afford to keep it.
That's wrong.
Like, even where I lived in Paulding County, when I moved there in 2011, the property taxes was $535 for 1 acre of ground, an 1,100 square foot house, and a double wide. Was $535. You know what they were when I moved in 2024? $3,900.
That's insane.
If you are an elderly person drawing just Social Security, how in the world could you pay $3,900? That's literally 4 or 5 months of your Social Security. That's literally a quarter of the years of money that you get. Mm-hmm. You know, back when my grandfather was growing up, that was their retirement, was their farm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
now it costs money to have your farm.
Yeah,
more money than you can make.
401k and stuff wasn't a thing, and it wasn't taught to them back. They literally grew up when the stock market crashed. They didn't care nothing about that thing. They didn't trust it at all. Mm-hmm. You know, that was their retirement. And people, you know, are always saying, oh, well, there's another farm going. It's going to be a subdivision. So, well, the family can't afford the dang thing, dude.
Yeah.
Because the county charges so much for it just to be on the side of Highway 27. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And Jim Bob wants to build a subdivision there and make him $40 million. They can't afford it.
Mm-hmm. That's happening right now in Floyd County. Like our little Facebook community page, there was a lady, and I think she owns a good amount of land. She's an elderly lady on our road who was just like reaching out to everyone in the community saying like she can't afford. I guess every year they've increased, Floyd County has. And she was saying, did you say yes, Chris? He said, yeah. Yeah, she was saying that she can't afford to stay in her home and she's got to take some kind of action. Like, she was trying to get the community to come with her, and I feel guilty, but I'm like, I don't think there's fruit in that. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, march on downtown? But I'm with you. There should be, like, who's monitoring these counties, and like, what are they basing these increases on, and how is that, like, you know what I mean? How's that fair?
Yeah, it's an equation that's in their favor. They're basing it on what resources they have to give to the schools, what resources they have to give to infrastructure. They're not supposed to be able to make any money. So if they've got projects that are projected to be in the millions upon millions of dollars, well, they have to get millions and millions of dollars, and they have to show how they spent millions and millions of dollars. So that it's supposed to be based completely off infrastructure, which includes your protection from the sheriff's department, the fire departments, the roadways, and so on and so forth. But
like, yeah, and there has to be some sort of taxation if you want those types of services, right?
Yeah,
there has
absolutely.
to be some way, unless you privatized those types of services, and then instead of paying taxes, you basically bought into the police force, and you said, okay, I'm a member now. And if something happens, I expect the police to come here and help me, or an ambulance to come pick me up, or a fireman to come put the fire out on my house. Like, you could go that route. I don't know what that would look like or what that would turn into. It would put a lot more personal responsibility on people.
Right.
That's for certain.
You be calling 911, they'd be like, what's your
member number?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Exactly.
What's your member number? Oh, sorry. Too bad. Your membership expired last month. You didn't renew your subscription.
You could go that route.
Yeah.
I don't see why you couldn't. But if you just want those to be public services, there has to be some sort of tax levied on people within the community. But on your home and your land, no, it shouldn't be on that.
them.
But what I'm thinking about, like with the personal property, and then I'll let it go, is like your example of Paulding County, that increase is insane.
Yeah.
So like you were in the police department and you know people, like what, like those things, is there major roadway improvements? Have the police department's salaries gone up? Did they all, like, is there tangible, I should know this because I complain about it, so I should look into it, but like, is that common knowledge for a community legally, like for us to go somewhere and see where that money's going?
Yeah, it's all open record. I mean, you can drive down 278 and look at the nice $7 million courthouse they built and the however many $1 million brand new jail that they didn't need that they built. You know, that's clear. Now, like the deputies did get a well-deserved raise, and they was able to put more people on staff, and so the roads are junk everywhere. If anytime a commissioner or councilman says we're doing this to build roads, that is bull crap. The roads are junk everywhere, period. The only ones that do the road half decent is the state. And then you're in a whole different conversation about taxes there.
How them property taxes in Chattooga County treating you?
I haven't got them yet.
What?
Yeah, I haven't got them yet. I'll get them. I'm sure they're doing That's why I like.
Really?
I'm when I ride around Chattooga County or Ruck or whatever I'm doing, I like the fact. I'm not saying I like the fact that the people are poor, but I like the fact that the houses don't look spectacular because those taxes have got to be bare minimal. Like those property taxes cannot be going up insanely. And there's very few subdivisions in Chattooga. Very few.
Well, and to go even further down that conversation, not only do you never own your property, you're leasing it from the government, but also you are told what you can and cannot do on your property.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You know, which is just another insane situation.
You have to pay more tax to get the permit for what they say you can do on your property. You have to pay more tax to be able to build a building on your property, or more tax to upgrade. I want to get a generator because I don't want to be cold if the power goes out in the wintertime. Well, you got to get a permit for us to inspect your electrical work when it's done. You know what I mean? And blase. On top of, you got to pay tax to drive your car up and down the road. You ain't got to pay it if you want to park it. But if you don't pay it and get that little sticker, we're going to give you another tax to drive your car up and down the road that says you didn't pay the first tax.
Yeah. It's deep, man.
It's so hard to navigate, like where my heart and my mind land on that, because I feel like, Boo, you and I have talked about before, and I've been places, I know you've been places that don't have a lot of permitting or regulation, and like Cindy never got a septic tank. She's doo-dooing in a 5-gallon bucket and dumping it in her front yard, and nobody cuts their grass, and it's mosquito-ridden, and like all the houses have these additions that look wild. Like, it's just nobody would want to live in an area like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, dang, I do like appreciate some level of like accountability on what you're doing with your home if it's inside a community. But then I'm like you, it pisses me off if I want to put a shed out front that I have to go ask for permission.
Right.
But
yeah.
I don't know. I'm on the, it's hard.
Yeah, there's really not a perfect solution, at all. I mean, and that's it's wild how human beings can actually go below the standard of living that an animal has. Like just a common animal won't like destroy their environment or their space but a human, like you see everything that's going on out in LA right now. The last time I went to LA was in 2019, which things have gotten a lot worse there apparently since 2019. And I drove through massive areas of that city where there were hundreds of thousands of people living lower than an animal. It was that low.
Like homeless people, or just
Well, yeah, I mean, many of them were homeless and whatever, But yeah, it's crazy, man, how the human can degrade to almost the lowest form, the lowest, nastiest, filthiest form of life on Earth.
Yeah,
It's crazy, man.
a lot of humans are capable of that.
Yeah, because you think about it, us kind of normal people who have standards of living, like we think, it would, like, why do we need to ask permission? Because we're not going to do something that's going to, like, make our environment worse. We're only going to make improvements to our environment.
Yeah.
So why do I need to make permission to make an improvement to my environment? And, like, if I'm going to make an addition to my house, it's going to be, I want it to be aesthetically pleasing because that's my environment. Like, I don't want it to look like crap.
right.
You know what I mean?
Old Deb buys her a
If everybody
Depot
thought that way, like, well, this would be great. But they don't. It's crazy, man.
We let it go on.
Yeah. Oh, well, we were supposed to talk about forging our mind in this podcast right here. And so I just thought about this, especially because of just the progress you've made over the last year and a half, 2 years, Biscuit, and the intentional steps that I've seen you take to essentially do this. Like forge your mind, like legitimate intentional training to harden your mind. And I've been thinking about, what does it mean to be forged by adversity or forging your mind? And, when we are born into this world, our mind is porous. In other words, our mind is taking in all of this stuff, all of this input, like everything is going into your mind and affecting your thinking and your worldview and your beliefs and your attitude and your feelings and your emotions and your mind is just super porous, right? And I think that's absolutely necessary for a young human being, because they need to be able to learn all of the things that are going to help them, become adults and get through this life. But there comes a certain point when you learn the things that you need to learn and you become an adult, that you need to start to essentially harden that mind to where all of this crap that is coming at you in the world is not able to penetrate your mind and affect your feelings and your emotions and your actions and your worldview and your thoughts. And like, to me, that is what the forging of the mind actually means. It's where we're hardening our mind in a sense that we can keep things out that aren't serving us in any way, shape, or form. Like, it can come at us, but it's not actually going to change the way that we think or operate that day, because it doesn't actually come into our minds and latch on to certain parts of our psyche or whatever you would want to call it. And that's what the forging process is, right? It's a hardening process. When we forge a blade or metal, we're hardening it. And I think it's cool to understand, again, what we actually mean when we see that or when we say that. And the forging process is also what you would call a violent process. It involves really high temperatures, and you guys have all seen videos of people forging blades and metals and metalwork, and they're hammering it, and sparks are flying, but ultimately, if the person is a good bladesmith or blacksmith, I guess is the trade that would forge metal. Ultimately the piece that comes out is shaped perfectly. It's hardened, and if it's a blade, it's sharpened, and but it's not it's not just this passive process, and I think that's why the forging process is such a great analogy to what's happening with our mind, and how the adversity that we experience is supposed to be hardening our mind over time, right? But I think we have to be intentional in terms of the decisions that we make as we move through adversity, if we want that forging process to actually take place, and we don't just want to allow whatever's happening to us to come into our mind and take over our mind and spiral us down into this hole of, whatever it may be for each of us out there, grief or sadness or anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? So when we look back on our lives and at all of these difficulties that we've experienced, we can, in context of this, we can actually look at those difficulties as a good thing, because if we respond to them properly, it's actually hardening us so that we can then move forward in life more effectively as we go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have y'all ever thought about it that way? Like when you heard that in the creed, have you ever really broke that down in your mind and thought about, okay, what does that mean? Forged by adversity. That means that my mind is becoming less porous. Yeah. Like I'm able to just kind of block out these thoughts and these situations and these things, and not that I believe our mind ever becomes completely solid, right? There are going, as that forging process continues throughout life, and as you're exposed to a hotter fire than you've ever been exposed to, there's going to be things that find their way in.
Yeah. Right.
So we've all been going through that process. Biscuit, you went through a real forging process over the last year and a half, probably. Mm-hmm. And I just saw a big shift in you in terms of, you beginning to make choices that were actually moving you into the direction of hardening your mind against these things more so than just allowing them to penetrate your mind and affect, your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what was one of the most important steps for you in this most recent season of adversity? Is there a step that stands out to you in terms of a choice you made or an action that you took to kind of begin to turn that process into a forging process and not just a process of spiraling, downward? Something stand out to you in that? I mean, just maybe one thing.
Yeah, only one thing.
That's all. However much you want to say about it, but I would like one meaningful thing at least to you.
Yeah, I love this topic, so I'm willing to stay here. I think the biggest thing that for me, and I think everybody's different in the things that they struggle with, but mine was learning the voices that I don't want to listen to, like inside my head and my heart. And most of them are like fear. It all revolves around fear for me, whether it's like fear of disappointing people, fear of your safety, fear of my safety, fear of failure, fear that I'm not doing a good job, fear that I made the wrong decision, fear that my life is not what it's supposed to be, like just fear. Like most of my bad behavior and my suffering came from, and I could trace it back to once I kind of backed up a little bit, to fear. So now I'm still in the process of kind of being able to filter the thoughts that come to the forefront of my mind that I'm conscious of on a daily basis, and just starting to notice patterns that don't align with who I want to be, and like catching those things. And I'm trying to think of a really relevant example. Like, I wish I could think of a good one. Just something that's shocking that comes in my mind of like, oh, maybe you're going to do something really hard or crazy.
Well, I think one of the big things, if you want a specific example that I've seen you work through, is how much traveling and like having to leave your environment, like with your bed, your pillow, your routine, like your food, all this stuff. Like that, you for a long time you wouldn't go anywhere because
I still traveled. I just wasn't as spontaneous.
Yeah.
Like we still traveled.
It was hard for you to enjoy it, I guess, because you were thinking about all of these other things. But
well, that is a good example. So say I am traveling with you, and especially like a last minute trip, and my mind goes to, well, what about work? Well, what about home? Well, what if you don't get to exercise? What if you don't? And I've started to pick up on those patterns of fear, and I know myself well enough, and I can before I go down that road of, well, what about work? And then before you know it, in the past, I would be 30 minutes into playing out all these scenarios of what could go wrong and trying to make a plan ahead of time to make sure these things didn't happen that I was scared of. And it was a lot of like mental gymnastics of me with uncertainty. So just when that thought comes now, I just know what it is most of the time, and I choose not to engage with it. I'm just like, yeah, that's that part of me that is still around, but I don't want to be that person anymore. And so, but a lot of that is just behavior and action, and just choosing to move in the direction of who you want to be in that situation, even if what your mind and your heart are telling you is not true. Like it doesn't align with that. It's getting outside of what your mind and your heart are telling you, which is a really weird thing to learn, because my body gives really, really big signals for things, especially things that I'm scared of, and to be able to get to a point that you can recognize that, even though every part of your body is telling you that threat is real, or this thing is something you need to really pay attention to and figure out, and like learning to let it go anyway.
That's the forging process.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone listening can probably relate to that in some way, shape, or form. I think this is something that we all have to experience at some point in life, and whether we go the right direction or not, we can look at a point in our life where we had to, we can relate to it, and it looks different for everyone, and for everyone it's different things that they're dealing with, and some may sound silly and some may sound big, but for everyone it's their own type of struggle. But it reminds me, in the way that I can relate to that specific aspect of the forging process, was when I decided I wanted to join the military. And you talked about moving toward the person who you actually want to show up as. Even though everything in you is telling you that this is uncomfortable to go in that direction. When I wanted to join the military, like everything in me, when I left home, was like screaming, no.
Yep.
No, you are not. No, like hitting me with every single emotion that you could even ponder up in your head, where fear, anxiety, sadness, loss, all of those things. But I had to make a decision to move toward who I wanted to become, which was this warrior, this new person. And that was a forging process for me. Like, that began to harden my mind and to say, yeah, man, even though, I think all of those things that I'm leaving are it doesn't feel right, I can still make the decision to move in the direction that I've decided I want to go to become the person who I want to show up as and who I want to be in this life. So my situation is totally different than yours.
Yeah.
But I think kind of similar in the journey.
It is similar, and like that's a really macro example of that strategy of like going against what your mind and your body are possibly telling you is the safe direction or the right direction. But I like, in my opinion, what I missed for so long was I would go do like ultra marathons or races or do cool things that were challenging and hard and hurt my body. And I thought that the growth that would come from the chosen adversity was just some kind of something that would just magically slap me upside the head and like enter my body, and I would be like better. And then I started to realize that like you have to take the lessons learned from those things and like consciously apply them to your everyday. It's not just some passive thing that happens if you keep like, yeah, you go run 100-miler. You're not just going to automatically be better at your job or a better husband or worry less or be less anxious, or if you struggle with anger or rage, you're all of a sudden not going to struggle as much. It's not like that. It's this like, it's a practice. It's a, okay, what helped me get through that 100-miler? Like, what was it? How do I practice that when I can't stop worrying about my kids' health? Like, how does that translate? And so that was what clicked for me, was like, okay, what is it? Like, how do I get through these big things? And then how can I, like on a Tuesday when I'm stuck worrying that I'm not good enough at my job and I'm failing, how can I apply that to get out of those like micro situations of adversity that like I waste a lot of time on? Like a lot of my bandwidth and joy and happiness over the years has been robbed by being worried and anxious and fearful about how things were going to go. And I don't want that anymore. And it's a long game. And a lot of it I've discovered too, which is disappointing and kind of cool, is that I expected, when I got better at those things, for the negative, the indicator that I was doing better at anxiety and fear and anger was that those things would go away. And like, that's not been the case for me completely. It's gotten better, but even if I move in the direction I want to be with something, it doesn't make the negative feelings go away. It's more of a radical acceptance of like, well, I'm a little stressed about work today, or I'm a little stressed about something you're doing and your safety. And like, I'm not going to let myself constantly think about it and try to fix it, or I'm not going to Google things to try to see what's the percentage chance, or is this place Chad's going really dangerous, or like, I'm not going to engage in any of that. Like, I'm just going to accept that this stresses me out a little bit and that's part of life, and move on. What's the thing you wanted to get done today? Let's focus on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
it's boring.
Yeah. Well,
it's really boring.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think on the same note, like you said, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, those things are not ever going to not be a part of your existence. Like, they're going to come. What changes is your response to those things.
That's a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, that's what changes through the process of forging your mind.
You become way more accepting of the negative emotions, which in turn makes them last a lot shorter of a time. Like, if you're really anxious, really angry, really sad, and all you can do is fixate on how anxious, sad, or angry you are, it's going to hang around a lot longer. Versus like, yeah, I'm feeling really sad today. And then you try to like lean back into your life and what you want to get done and what you do value. It's most of the time for me, it just disappears on its own. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's different. I
think about it for me too. Another thing that's actually been challenging for me that I don't often talk about is just having 3 of 7 project for the last 5 years. Like this being what we do as our mission and as our livelihood. And, you know, you talk about transferring the lessons that you learn through these physical, you know, challenges, or for me through my career in the SEAL teams. You know, there's so much uncertainty when you own your own business. There's so much uncertainty, and there's such a burden of responsibility to get done what needs to get done, and to continue to innovate, and to continue to find ways to grow and to make things better. Like the responsibility's high, the uncertainty is extremely high. Mm-hmm. I mean, we literally, as long as we've been in business, we don't know what next year is going to look like. You know what I mean? It's like, and for me, taking the lessons that I've learned from these intentional physical endeavors that I've done, how I apply it here to this situation, which is in real life, is, you know, when I do start feeling that worry or the burden of that uncertainty, I just think, well, I'm going to do my best at whatever the next thing is. Mm-hmm. Like whatever the thing that's coming is, like I'm just going to show up and I'm going to do the best that I can possibly do at that thing. And that's been my process really over the last 4 or 5 years. That's how I operate heavily. Is it's like last weekend we had a basic course. And it's the way I operate is as I go along, I'm saying, okay, we've got this basic course. I'm going to show up as the best instructor and the best mentor that I can possibly be at this basic course. Well, then today we have a podcast. Well, the last 2 days I've been thinking about, I'm going to show up as best as I can possibly show up for this podcast. Mm-hmm. Sunday I have Resurrected. When we get done with this podcast, my mind then shifts to how can I show up and be the best teacher that I can possibly be at Resurrected. Then we have Rite. And so I am constantly moving to the next thing and just thinking about how can I do my best at this thing, right? And when you do that over and over and over again, that keeps you moving on a overall trajectory that is good.
That's so well said.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
How do you deal with that stuff, Corn?
Well, I'm just here recent, just real quick, you know, so we had always had, me and my wife had always had one of the boys in the house, both of them until they was in their 20s, and then at least one of them up until we recently moved at the end of January. So when we moved, something hit me that I did not expect at all. We'd been talking about moving for months. We knew the area we was probably going to move to. Well, when we moved, I mean, it literally hit me day 2, maybe even night 1. Like, holy crap. We're an hour and a half from the boys, and somebody might say, well, that's pretty elementary, and I get it. Like, now I say that's pretty elementary, but hour and a half from the boys, 3 counties away. You know, I'd been with the boys every day, at least one of them, their entire life for 25 years. So that, you know, people call it the empty nest syndrome. Well, I could probably say that I had never felt any depression in my life until that. Sadness. And I was like, what in the crap? Like, I had these thoughts that if they need me, I'm too far away to get to them, even if it's something like they need help with an alternator. And these are 21 and 25-year-old men, that young men that we're talking about. But so, I mean, it even went to like day 4. My wife said at 6 o'clock, do you realize all you've ate today is 2 pieces of broccoli? I didn't even know I wasn't eating because I was letting that consume my mind. And I talked to Brooke about it on the squirrel hunt, and I'd mentioned it to you and Blake. And so I was realizing what was going on. So when you was talking about the realization of what's happening is real important. So as I was realizing what was going on, it was really interesting, and I got over it in a snap. And this is how it happened. I told Brooke about the tornado that that went through.
Yes, that was crazy.
So a tornado comes through where my oldest son was that bought our house. And I'm on the phone with him as this tornado's coming through. And whether it was the Holy Spirit, whether it was me, I don't know. But as I'm talking to him and I can hear these trees snapping, I just think to myself, and I even said to Ann, my wife, I said, they know Jesus. If they pass away, it's fine. They're good. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, that's instantly in my head on the phone while this tornado goes through. Tornado comes through. What we got to do tomorrow? Hang up the phone? Dude, there ain't been a single bit of depression, sadness, or nothing with it. And a couple of times now I've been like, dude, you really thought that about your kid and his fiance? Like a tad bit of guilt. And I was like, well, you're realizing that's bull crap that you're feeling guilt about that. So just squash it. And that's happened a couple of times. But in that specific instance, it was like nothing I particularly said, hey, I'm realizing these feelings and that they're bull crap and these are grown men and I'm comfortable with the way me and the wife's raised them and so on and so forth. This is what's supposed to happen. I didn't work through none of that like that. It just happened with a snap of a finger in that one instance. And I think that is indeed possible. But I think it's important to, like you said, realize the feelings that's going on. 'Cause most of the times our feelings aren't fact anyway. Most of the time they're just bull crap.
Yep.
You know, but they were derived in fear, you know, oh, I'm not going to be there to help them. Like they have to have me to help them all the time, you know what I mean? So I also think it is very possible that you're forging, like in a specific instance, is bam, you're sharp enough. Like you're sharp right there. And I'm serious, dude, I hadn't worried a single bit about any of that bull crap since then. Other than those three little things of, dude, you really thought, like it was legit. Like this tornado literally went right beside their house, like right beside it, tore trees down, destroyed cars, houses all around them destroyed. And I thought, and said it out loud to my wife, if they pass in this, they're fine. Mm-hmm. It's okay. And I was like, holy smokes, dude, I said that about my kid. And then I was like, dude, that's just bull crap guilt. Call it from the enemy, whatever you want to call it from my own messed up mind. That's bull crap. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's a cool representation of the truth of Scripture where we read that the Lord Jesus and his gospel and the faith that he's given us can produce a peace in us that surpasses all understanding. And that essentially a part of that peace is making us into a people that all these troubles cannot penetrate our mind, right? Because we do have this eternal hope and this peace that surpasses all understanding. But, you know, along with that, Jesus also tells us, in this life you will have troubles. That's so right. He's telling you you're going to have troubles.
Yeah.
But with me, you can also have peace in the midst of those troubles. Yeah. If you know, once you realize the truth that you realized of man, I have been clinging way too tightly to this physical experience that we're all having that we call life. You know what I mean?
Well, you go first.
I think another reason it snapped me like that is, though I didn't think this in my mind, but looking back on the thought, if I had been in the same house that he had just bought where we was living and all that distance wasn't between us, I wasn't going to be the one that would save him if the tornado was actually going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah, even if you would have been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
There's I think what happened to you was a spiritual and just like it's a really cool story.
Yeah.
There to me, there's a lot of cool stories like that about when people really like a real life event come up against what they fear the most. And like, that's, to me, that's what happened to you.
Yeah.
Is like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like the underlying fear I have is something happening to my kids, and especially me not being there.
Yeah.
And like, you're on the phone with him hearing a tornado and he's telling you it's coming and you're like 3 counties away. And
Yeah.
like in that moment, I feel like you can either get way worse, like it could revert, you know, like you could go down to the pit and realize, oh crap, something can happen to them. Dear Lord. Like, and then it's just heightened and worse. Or what happened to you is such a gift of like, oh, that came true. Like that almost came true.
Yeah.
And I was okay.
Well, it's funny to think that this forging process that we're talking about is not actually always going to look like you doing a hard workout or you running a 100-mile race. What it could actually look like is you coming to accept the reality that you are actually not in control. Like, that's weird how that can be part of the forging process, is accepting the fact that, oh, you're not actually in control of anything. Like, you're not in control of your health.
That's right.
Like, not complete
hardest.
control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not in control of protecting your spouse or your children, not completely. Like, there, you know, you can do things and you should do things to stay healthy, and you should do things to take care of your family and be a protector and a provider. But ultimately, when you get down to the bottom of it, you know, you're not in ultimate control of anything.
God, that's such a hard thing for me though. That's been another.
But you
long
can't
term.
realize that until, like you just said, Cornbread came up against his greatest fear, and he had to look it in the eyes and
Right.
then have that realization. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is true. That's kind of what that is you realize how little control you have, and you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
ooh.
Yeah, so the forged by adversity is not always necessarily this motivational, inspiring thing that you see on a YouTube video or an Instagram post. It's actually a very can be a very violent process of not fun stuff. And stuff that you don't choose. You're not able to choose or allowed to choose.
Or it can be something super like lame by society standards and subtle, like you don't treat your wife well, or like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but just something like choosing something in your everyday that really challenges you, that you know based on your values and your faith that you should be doing, but that's really hard for you, and just choosing that over and over and over again. And nobody's going to think you're cool for that.
Mm-mm.
Like, you're not going to be able to share that on a podcast or on social media or with your friends of like, I made my wife dinner 3 days this week and I absolutely hate that activity and I think she should be the one making me dinner, but I did it anyway because like I value our relationship. And like, to me, that's like, in my experience, that's where like the real growth comes, not from these big outward expressions of like this daring thing you chose to do.
Yeah. I think it can all be part of the forging process. It just doesn't always look like what we think it should look like, right?
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I have to cook tonight. I'm scared to death. I'm cooking
5-hour soup.
No, I'm cooking chicken curry tonight.
That's curry's Indian, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Indian food. But I knew that Brooke would like it, so
Yeah.
it's
Biscuit
it's
on,
forging me for sure.
but you didn't. That was totally on your own. You and I didn't have any trouble. There wasn't anything. We were in a great spot, and you were like, "I'm gonna start cooking you dinner once a week." And I was like, "Wow, that was a really sweet thing you did."
Yeah, I'm being forging.
Seriously,
Forging myself,
you're
son.
forging. You're being selfless.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to cover today, and hopefully that's beneficial to you guys. I do want to have some time to get to our Patreon question of the week, though, Corn, if you got one.
Absolutely.
If you guys don't know about Patreon, there'll be a link to our Patreon page in the description of this episode, and you can click on it, check it out. We have a separate podcast over there called the Comms Check that drops every Friday. So here in 2 days, the newest Comms Check is going to be coming out. We do a live call every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time called Resurrected, where Blake or I or even Cornbread now is starting to teach on Resurrected. That lasts about an hour, and it's good conversation, a great group of people on Resurrected every night. And we do some behind-the-scenes stuff there, so if you want to join us on Patreon, you feel led to do that, we appreciate your support. We do take a question every Wednesday from our Patreon community. What you got this week, CB?
So this is a brand new, fresh Patreon member. Fresh. From the 5th of June, he just joined. He's looking for some advice. Reese McGee. He wanted to know if we had any past episodes that covered this topic, and I scrolled through. Man, we got so many episodes. Like trying to find some specific advice on something would take you forever. So I shoot, we'll do this on Patreon. I work in a family business that currently spans 3 generations. My grandfather, his 3 sons, which include my father, then my 3 cousins and myself. I recently began to realize that a lot of what my grandfather, the patriarch of this family, is sounding very similar to some false teachings that Christ warned us about. It's also, now I have examples with my own family of how the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and whoever loves money never has enough. At this point in time, I don't have any intentions to leave the company, but I also won't allow myself to be surrounded by people with morals that are opposite from mine, even if they are family. I'm praying somehow I can help mend broken relationships rather than just give up on my family and jump ship.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's his name again?
Reese McGee.
Reese, I love that you actually quoted Scripture properly when it talks about money. The love of money is the source or the root of all kinds of evil, all right? The love of money. That's the word most people leave out when they want to leverage that scripture because, whatever. They're mad because they've been poor their whole lives and they can't figure out how to unpoor themselves because they're not willing to work hard enough. So then they just come out and say, well, money is the root of all sorts of evil. It's like, no. You're making money your God is the root of all sorts of evil. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that he actually quoted that properly. Look, man, you said you don't plan to leave the family business. You plan to stay around there, and I talk about in the speech that I give most often when I go and get to give live talks to people. I talk about your environment and essentially meaning the people that you're surrounded by on a day-to-day basis, right? And I talk about seeking an environment to where you surround yourself with the right people who are better than you, people who are going to call you up to a higher standard, people who are going to hold you accountable, all that stuff, right? Well, obviously, this is your career, this is your family's business, and you say you plan to stay there. So, you're not planning to leave that job to go and work somewhere where you're actually surrounded by the people who are going to be the type of people to help you grow. So the other option or the other thing or piece of that speech is if you are stuck in a situation in your home, in your work, whatever it is, and those people don't exist, you need to become that person for those people. All right? And they are going to probably not like you very much at first, all right? But it's also going to require you to make some conscious decisions to really hold yourself accountable and hold yourself to a very high standard, especially when you're interacting with them. And you never want to do this in a way that makes you're basically peacocking. You know what I mean? Like I'm better than you guys. You really have to, in your heart, decide to become that person because you love these people, right? It has to be done from a place and a position of love for them ultimately. And so that'll help you kind of navigate it and help you figure out how you should be acting and how you should be responding to them. And it'll also put you in a place that you can have grace with them, because it's probably going to be a long process. But you becoming that person in the midst of that environment will indeed rub off on them and will indeed produce change in their lives, just by way of them seeing the joy that you have and the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you live your life, and the things that you honor and the things that you value, and you being open about those things. You again, leading by example in those areas, and it is way easier to just leave that place. And if you had no attachments or ties to these people, in other words, if they weren't your family and this wasn't your family business, like, I would probably counsel you to leave that environment and go find a better place to serve and to work, right? But since this situation is unique to you, this is, I think, something that you're going to, whatever you want to call it, you are being called to be that person who sets that example and who holds the people around you, to some sort of standard because of your love for them, right? And even if they think you're silly, even if they poopy on you and talk bad about you behind your back and all that stuff, like, and you got to give it time, man. But like, sometimes that's what our job is. That's what we're there for, is to become that person. And is it ever going to be perfect or exactly the way you want it to be, or are those people going to just completely change overnight? No. But I guarantee you that your presence there and will produce fruit and change over time.
It feels like a very good example of what we were talking about being forged. Like if Reese,
yeah,
if he decides, hopefully he decides to stick with it and stay there, and like every day make those decisions. Like that's choosing adversity.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to become better in that, unless you just went down the bitter road,
Uh-huh.
Like, it's pretty cool that he wants to do that.
Yeah, I don't got much I can add to that. It ain't going to be fun the whole time. Just stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think along the way in that process, I think it is also important to keep your own flaws in perspective, right? And also don't try to cover those up, and don't try to act like you're perfect around them either. You know what I mean? So it's a balance, and you have to do it. And sometimes you're going to do it wrong. But I think that's your option, man.
I think what you just said is really cool. Why do you think that's important to not try to be perfect around those people?
Well, I mean, I think it's important for you, because you can't decide, okay, this is what I'm being called to do, and then all of a sudden that becomes just you taking pride in how much better you are than the people around you, because then you become ineffective. Because we're not going to accomplish anything if we're operating out of our own pride and self-righteousness. But I think it's also good just from a relational standpoint with the people that you're trying to make an impact on, for them to also see that you struggle with stuff too, you know what I mean? And that you are actively holding yourself accountable and working toward making the changes that you need to make as they pertain to the things that you struggle with.
That's good.
Dad, we got any super chats?
Oh, yeah.
We got super chats coming up, and I guess will you grab that phone from Dad, boo-boo? And then our Paris James. I need to quit calling him Dad on the podcast, Paris James. I guess this will be the first time ever on the 3 of 7 podcast that I've read the super chats. Oh. Maybe I shouldn't read them. You want to read them, boo-boo?
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Okay. Yeah, you better read them. It might be.
You knew you were supposed to read those.
Why shouldn't you read them?
Well, I don't know.
All right. First up, we got Marty Bingham.
Imagine that.
$9.99. One, I had a good trip to New York City. I did a marathon distance of forward ambulation in the rain.
There you go.
That's big for Marty. A marathon at 85 years old.
That's big.
That's real big.
Cut
in
off
the rain.
overalls.
Yeah.
Cut off overalls.
He might have some sort of Guinness Book of World Records there.
In Yankee land.
Yeah.
Wait, how old is Marty?
He's like 85, 86
No,
years
he's
old.
not.
Oh, yeah, Marty's.
He's at least that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he's deep in his 80s.
Y'all are being mean to
No,
him.
he is.
Have you not seen how old that Joker is?
I know. I thought he was in his early 70s.
Oh, no. He's in
Is he really not,
He's
Chris?
in his mid-80s at least.
Dang, Marty,
Yeah,
you
that
had me
Joker's old
fooled.
as crap, man.
Babe.
Amazing he still gets around.
Old as Methuselah.
And just at a marathon? Good night.
What is forward ambulation, though?
That's how he moves. He just kind of ambles in a forward direction. When you get that old, that's kind of just how you move.
Okay, he said that we got Marty Bingham coming in again, but this time he cut it in half at $4.99.
Yeah, he does that tightwad.
So, number 2, I had some time left over, so I switched up and did 9 miles of biomechanical locomotion because I'm fancy.
Okay.
Huh.
Must have learned that somewhere.
Well, thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Marty.
Oh, wouldn't you know? I got a Marty Bingham coming in back at $9.99. If you know any Navy squeals who are struggling with mental toughness or anything, let me know, and I'll be glad to help them out.
Navy Shields.
He put squeals.
He's a tough old bird, man.
Navy squeals.
Thank you,
Built
Marty.
bridges all his life.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
built bridges?
Yeah.
Yeah. He just tore one down in Cave Spring.
Yeah, you drove across the bridge, and Marty probably built it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just tore one down in Cave Spring. Tore it down in a day. The whole bridge.
You remember those? What?
Yeah.
Tore it all down in one day?
Sure did.
Dang, Marty. Do you remember those hats Marty got us?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I sat on my hat and I thought it would be okay, and it disintegrated. Literally, it just puffed. All the straw exploded.
That straw hat? Yeah.
Yeah, I was so sad. I was wearing that thing every day. So
Well,
I
you do have a big old butt, boo-boo.
we made it this far. We made it this far without him making it awkward.
Yeah.
Your butt would eat a hat.
Whoa.
Next, Robert Lee.
Robert E. Lee?
I like when Corn says that. His eyebrows go up really high. $10. I painted my house one summer, and the county raised the property value by 100 stinking grand. I paid sales tax. Why can't I upkeep it and make it nice? They got some bull algorithm running the show.
They raised his property tax by 100 grand?
100 stinking grand.
We need to march on that
Dang,
capital, son. Good night.
Burn
Live
it
in
down.
Chicago.
Where do
you
you
can
live,
afford
Robert
that, Robert
Lee?
E. Lee. You can give way more on
Yeah,
these
you gotta
super
give
chats.
them $10, man. Good night.
Great.
100 stinking grand.
Oh,
Oh, you all right?
oh, yeah, my heel just slipped off of that bar on that table.
Darn, take it easy.
Good
Oh,
night.
Robert E. Lee coming in again.
Robert E. Lee?
at $10. He said 2 Corinthians 10:5. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. To this verse I hold tight.
That's good, Rob Lee.
That is a really good verse for what we were talking about.
Yeah.
It is.
Super good. Oh, Robert Lee coming in again, $10.
Dang.
It's two men holding up this whole podcast. He said, corn, the empty nest pain connected with how you, corn, the empty nest pain connected you with how the Father God loves us and misses us and draws close to us. And yet your peace is in and by the Son of God who saved us all. Great example, corn.
Believe that. Thank you, Robert.
That was a really good example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Deplorable lawn guy coming in, $19.99.
There we go.
Son,
Cutting grass, stacking cash.
there you go. He ain't
Dang
been here
right.
in a while. He ain't been here in a while.
Bill,
It's grass cutting season. A man can make some dang money cutting grass, son.
he'd be hard pressed in the southeast right now with the way the weather's
the
been.
rain's been, yeah.
That'd be a stressful profession to be in.
Yeah.
Dang.
Thank you, deplorable.
Thank you, deplorable. Brian Burgess coming in with $99.99.
Good night.
Son.
And there's the sweetest message. Love you guys. Thank you for what you do and you bring to us.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate you being here this week, man.
That's wonderful.
Thank you for that super chat.
And that's it.
All right, guys. Well, thank y'all for tuning in. Biscuit, thank you for coming and being a part of the talk today.
Thank you for having me.
And Lord willing, we'll see y'all back on Monday for Monday meeting. Enough said.